Hey friends, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my June wrap-up where I read a total of 16 books in the month of June. I actually had a pretty fantastic reading month in the month of June, but not a fantastic month for my life because I got really sick at the end of June. I had this flu and this fever for an entire week. It really sucked. I haven't been this sick in a long time and so I am still recovering, so if my voice sounds kind of weird, it's because I'm still getting over it. But wow, that flu was really trying to take me out. But anyways, this month it was a pretty great reading month because I was working on a lot of reading vlogs that were targeted towards me having a successful reading month. I mean, the first vlog that I worked on this month was a reading new thriller and horror books kind of reading vlog, which is a vlog that I love to do on this channel all the time. But then I also did a very special reading vlog this month where I read books that you think that I would give 5 stars. And that was one of the most successful reading vlogs that I've ever made. I actually did an extended version of this on my Patreon where I read an additional 2 books. So I read a total of 7 books for this video project and it was such a huge success that I definitely want to do a round 2 of this in the future. And then, to top it all off, I ended the month with another reading vlog that was, can't stop reading until I find a new 5-star favorite. So I really just set myself up this month to find all of the 5-star reads. And I really did because I found 3 new favorite 5-star reads this month. I did end up having a few different DNFs this month, including Looking for Love in All the Haunted Places as well as ASAP. These were 2 books that I was trying to read during my Screaming Color weekend, which ended up being a complete failure, by the way, because I got sick, I had this flu, and then right in the middle of getting this flu, I was supposed to be hosting Screaming Color, and it was kind of a hot mess. And then the purple books that I was trying to read for my readathon weren't going very well either. It was just a completely hot mess, epic fail of a readathon for me. And then I also did end up DNFing The House That Horror Built by Christina Henry this month. That one just wasn't my thing. It just wasn't my thing. I don't know, Christina Henry has just been not doing so hot for me recently. I also did want to mention over on my Patreon this month, I did post a June monthly vlog kind of video. It's an hour and 15 minutes because I had so much to talk about. And in that monthly vlog, I talked about some big life updates. I did some Tortured Poets Department guitar covers. Me and my sister did a crumble cookie taste test and all kinds of fun stuff. So I'll have that vlog linked down below if you want to go and check it out. And also, just a reminder that my Trova trip is going to be happening in the month of October. We're going to Italy. If you haven't heard about it yet, I would love to have you join us. July is actually going to be one of the last months that you can sign up for my trip. So if you've been thinking about it at all throughout the year, now would be the time to sign up because I only have a few spots left on this trip because time is of the essence. Oh my gosh, this trip is less than 4 months away and I can't wait to explore Italy. Oh my gosh, it's going to be the best time ever. So I'll have the link down below if you want to see the full itinerary, see all what's included in the price, and I would love to have you there. Something crazy about this month is that I actually read 0 graphic novels or manga. I didn't read any manga this month. I don't even know who I am anymore. But I thought maybe it would be fun to organize this wrap up a little bit differently from the way that I typically do it. Because usually when I do my wrap ups, I show you the books in order that I read them that month. But I thought for this month, why not? We can mix it up. I thought it would be fun to show you the books in order from least favorite all the way up to favorite, or at least my lowest rated all the way up to my highest rated, because it's really hard for me to pick a favorite out of all the 5 stars that I had this month. And I thought it would be more fun to get all of the roasting out of the way right from the start, right? Because the lowest rated book that I had this month was actually A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson, and I ended up giving this one 2 whole stars, and I was very upset about it because if you didn't know, this is actually the 3rd book in the Kind Worth Killing trilogy. I don't know why they decided to change this title and cover for the 3rd book because the first book is The Kind Worth Killing, and then we have The Kind Worth Saving, and now we have A Talent for Murder. It doesn't even sound like it belongs in the series, but it is the 3rd book in the series. And technically, yes, I think you can read this one as a standalone, but I personally would recommend reading them in order because there are some things that you might get spoiled for about The Kind Worth Killing. There's characters from The Kind Worth Killing in this book. But this book, I'm so upset that it ended up being 2 stars because I was having such a good time with it. I thought the premise for this story was really fun because we're just following this woman named Martha who starts to suspect that her husband might be a serial killer. And it was just really entertaining, and I love the fact that Martha reaches out to her friend Lily for some help with this investigation into her husband. And Lily is one of the characters from The Kind Worth Killing, so it was really cool to see Lily back in action in this book. But oh my gosh, dude, parts 2 and parts 3 of this book were so freaking boring and so repetitive and nothing happened. And then the ending of this book was so flippin' frustrating. Oh my god, I was not a fan of the way that this book ended. I thought it was such lazy writing and just unsatisfying, and I was just really upset about it. If you want to see all of the thoughts, I did vlog my experience with this book. It was in the first vlog that I did for this month. Oh my gosh, I did not have a good time with it. It was 2 stars. I was so mad. Another book that I ended up giving 2 stars this month is going to be the Romcoms stars by Catherine Center. I originally said I think I'm gonna give this 2.5 stars, but the more that I reflect on this book, the more I'm like, no, this was more of a 2-star, because I, for the most part, don't really have positive things to say about this one. This one is a romance novel that I was really excited about because I like the idea of screenwriters working together on like a romantic comedy. I think that's really fun. I always love reading romance books that follow writers in general. Like, I just think that's one of my favorite tropes. And I thought this one would be right up my alley because this one also does have like the hate to love kind of feel to it, or at least like they don't get along very well. They're kind of like rivals at the beginning kind of vibe. Charlie Yates, like the love interest man in this book, absolutely not. I could not stand him, dude. He was just so annoying. He was so condescending. He was like one of those pretentious assholes who just like thinks that he knows better than everybody else. And like, yeah, maybe you could say like, oh, he comes around though and he really like softens up to her, but like he never really grew on me as a character. And I didn't mind the protagonist of this book. Like, I thought she was fine, but like there were some things about her that also rubbed me the wrong way, especially in the second half. Like the way that she would like treat her sister in the second half, I just didn't think it was very cool of her. And then also like the writing style in this book, I touched on this in the vlog that I did where I talked about it, but the writing style in this book was also kind of a choice at times. Like, it would just really bother me how the narrator of the book, like our protagonist, would like directly address the reader so often. It just made it feel so cheesy and so cringy. So yeah, this was 2 stars. I'm so sorry. Everybody loves this book and I really don't understand. All right, next up is gonna be You Know What You Did. This is one that I unfortunately ended up giving around like 2.5 stars. This one is a mystery thriller, supposedly, and we're following this woman who is Vietnamese American, and she has recently lost her mother. Like, her mother's recently died, and so we're kind of following her after the events of her mother dying and how her OCD starts to come back really strong after her mom dies. And this woman, she has like, you know, a family. She has a husband and a daughter, and the daughter is like a teenager, and they're kind of having a rough relationship themselves. And I feel like this story is a lot. It's talking a lot about motherhood and like mother and daughter relationships. And like, these relationships are not the best, you know, like the mother-daughter relationships in this book are kind of toxic, but they were very fascinating and very interesting to read. I actually really liked the way that the characterization was done in this book. I thought it was done very well, but I think the reason why I ended up not enjoying this one too much is because it's just really slow paced. Like, there's not a lot that really happens in this book. I thought the middle part really started to drag and the story got really repetitive, but then also the ending of the book, I just didn't really like where the story ended up going. I didn't find it to be that surprising. I actually thought it was really predictable. And I don't know, I guess I just expected so much more from this, and I feel like it could have gone in a really interesting direction. Like, I feel like this is one of those stories that had a lot of potential, but it just didn't really work for me personally. I don't know, it was 2.5 stars. Okay, and this is where you might want to cancel me, okay, because I have a very unpopular opinion on this next book, and this actually kills me to say this, but I think A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston, I think this might be 2.5 stars for me. And I know, I'm literally as shocked as you are, because I held this book up in my video where I was like, can't stop reading until I find a 5-star read, and I was like, this is gonna be my backup in case I don't find a 5-star, because I know that this one's gonna be a 5-star. And like, Ashley Poston has written some of my favorite romances ever, like The Dead Romantics and The 7-Year Slip were both 5 stars for me. What happened here? And you know, like, the saddest part about this is that I was reading this book while I was sick, and I was like hoping that this book would like bring me all the comfort and good feelings that I needed during that time, and then it didn't do that for me, and I was so sad. But this story is one that I thought I would love this. I thought it would be 5 stars for me, especially because the premise also just sounds really cool, that we're following a protagonist who like ends up in the world of her favorite book, and she like starts to fall in love with a man who might be fictional, like he might not even be real. It sounds like the typical, you know, shit that I love from Ashley Poston, because she always has these romances with like just a touch of like something magical in them. But dude, oh my god, there was so much about this one that just didn't work for me personally. Part of me wants to blame the audiobook, okay? Part of me does want to blame the audiobook, because I found the audiobook narration to be so annoying. Oh my god. I don't know what it was about this girl's voice, but like it just was grating on my ears, and I think it was part of the reason why I like was not connecting to this protagonist. I mean, it very much could have been like the writing style mixed with the annoying audiobook narrator, but like there was just something about this that I did not connect with the characters. It just wasn't working for me. And then also like, dude, this romance was so fucking repetitive. Like, holy shit. If I have to read one more time that he has like minty green eyes, and then he smells and tastes like black tea, oh my gosh, like, can you find any other descriptive words, my girl? It was just so annoying, you know? And I saw another Goodreads reviewer, they mentioned that she says that he smells like black tea at least 29 times. Like, they counted 29 times? that's excessive. I don't know. I don't even like the smell of black tea. So I was just kind of annoyed by like the writing style in this. I didn't connect with the characters. I just wanted to love it so badly and I just did not love it. And then even the ending of this book, I'm not even sure that I love like the direction that the story ended up going in either. And I was flabbergasted, to be honest. Like after I was getting halfway through the book, I was like, the way that I'm not loving this, like I actually wanted to DNF it so badly. But then I was like, okay, like let's just continue to see it through. And I was even thinking, I was like gaslighting myself into thinking maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I need to like start the book over from the beginning because maybe I'm just like not reading it the right way. But I was like, no, it's just boring. It's just boring. I didn't like it. And I'm so sad about it. Like I'm genuinely, this is devastating. This is maybe one of the biggest devastations of the whole year for me, that I didn't love this one. All right, the next book that I'm going to be talking about is The Watchers by A.M. Shine. This is one that I ended up feeling pretty middle of the road on. I think I gave this one around 3 stars. And this one is a horror book that I actually read for the video where I read books that you think that I will give 5 stars. And unfortunately, this one ended up being the lowest book that I read for that video. I mean, it was still a 3-star, like I didn't hate it, but I was still surprised because this is one that I was actually really excited to read on my own as well. And in this story, we're following this character named Mina, and she finds herself like trapped in this place that's in the forest, but like it's not on any map. And it's weird because like when she pulls up with her car just like completely shuts off and like all of the technology fails her. And she finds herself getting trapped at this place in the middle of the forest with these few other people. And they say like, oh, well, you'll never be able to leave here. And like, don't worry, they won't hurt us if they can see us. Like they're just gonna be watching us. And you're like, who are they? Like, what are you talking about? I think this book has such a cool premise. It is so interesting and so unique and genuinely so creepy. Like there were some scenes in this book that will stick with me in my head. And I thought, wow, that's really creepy and eerie. And I love that. The majority of this book is just so slow and boring. And I just didn't really connect with any of these characters personally. It would be like there was like one cool creepy moment and I'd be like, ooh, it would like pull me back in. And then it would be another like 20 pages of just like boring shit that I did not care about. It was just so inconsistent, I guess, with like the tone, and the pacing was just terrible. Even though this book is only about 300 pages, it took me so much longer to read this than I thought it would because I thought it would fly by. But like the writing style is just so dense that it took me so much longer to read. There was one cool like kind of plot twist towards the end that I personally didn't see coming, but then there was like an additional thing at the end that I was like, you know, I don't know if I like the direction of like where the story went. And I know that there's like a sequel coming out for this book soon, but I don't think I have any interest in reading the sequel, to be honest. I don't. I still do want to see the movie that just came out, even though I've been hearing even worse things about the movie. But like, I'll give the movie a shot, but I have no interest in reading the sequel for this. And then another 3-star that I had for this month is actually Listen for the Lie, which is a little bit of a bummer because this is my booktube book club pick for the month of June. And sadly, it was only a 3-star for me, but I'm still glad that I had this one as a book club pick this month because I do see so many people giving this book 4 or 5 stars. Like it seems like overall this was a good choice for the book club because it seems like a lot of people are loving it and I enjoyed it. Okay, it's not like a favorite of mine, but it's still a 3-star. Like I still had a fun time with this because in this story we're following this protagonist named Lucy, and she is getting accused of like murdering her best friend Savannah. And this is back when she was like living in this small town in Texas, and now it's been 5 years since this has happened. And now there's this guy Ben who's going to be starting this podcast called Listen for the Lie, and he's going to be like trying to uncover the truth about what really happened that night. Because Lucy actually has amnesia from that night. Like she doesn't remember anything about the night that her friend Savannah died, but she is convinced that she couldn't have done this. But like she doesn't have any way to prove it, you know, because she doesn't even remember anything about that night. And so this is about how she's going to be going back to that small town in Texas, and she kind of starts to connect with this guy Ben who's doing the podcast. And yeah, I don't know, there was a lot of things that I really loved about this book. Like I actually did like the protagonist Lucy quite a bit. Like I thought her personality was like really funny to read in this book. I loved the podcast element. Oh my gosh, the audiobook was freaking fantastic. It was so cool because you would get the podcast elements included in the audiobook in between the chapters, and the way they were able to edit it with the sounds, it just sounded so cool. It sounded like a real podcast. I also really loved the small town vibes in this, and I did love her grandma. Oh my god, her grandma was such a standout character for me. But otherwise, this book ended up being 3 stars for a few reasons for me, and the main one is that I just don't really love reading thrillers where like the main character has amnesia, and then like at the most convenient times in the story they start to remember like crucial things. I just find that to be so incredibly cheesy and just kind of like convenient for the story. Like I don't know, it's just not my thing. I feel like there could have been so much more done with the ending of this book because I feel like this is one of those books where it's just one big reveal and then like that's just it, you know? And I feel like the big reveal itself, you know, it was kind of predictable for me. Like it wasn't anything crazy. I was like, okay, like I could have told you that that was coming. So it was a little bit underwhelming for me in the end, but it was still a fun time. Like I can see why everybody's loving this. I can't wait to discuss this book soon. And then I also read Curse of the Reaper. This is one that I ended up giving around like 3.5 stars. This is one of the books that I included in like the Patreon extended version of reading books that you think that I'll give 5 stars. This one was recommended by my friend Casey on Patreon, and I'm so glad that she recommended this one because this one was right up my alley. This one was really interesting because it's a horror book that kind of touches on like the 80s nostalgia of horror movies, because in this book there was like this huge franchise in the 80s that was like the Curse of the Reaper, and the guy who like played the Reaper movie villain was kind of like one of the iconic movie villains of the 80s. Like he was comparable to like Jason or like Ghostface or like Michael Myers, you know, like he was up there. And now, years and years and years later, they're gonna be rebooting this series with a new actor. And it's kind of about how like the older actor who used to play the Reaper, he's kind of like, no, like this is my character. But now this guy who was the Reaper, he's kind of experiencing like dementia and he's like not doing the best with his health. And then the younger actor who's going to be taking over the new role of the Reaper, he is just getting out of rehab and he's been dealing with like addiction. And so I feel like this is one of those horror books where it does touch on a lot of like real life horrific things, you know, like dementia and like addiction. And I thought the characters in this book were so interesting. I thought that they were well fleshed out. I think some of the pacing in this book was a little bit slow for me at times, but then the freaking ending, oh my gosh, I really, really loved the ending. Like I thought the ending was so solid. And then I ended up reading Margos Got Money Troubles. I actually listened to this one on audio, and this ended up being a pretty good time. Like, I don't know, I was pretty surprised by this. I went into this book knowing absolutely nothing. Like I just got the audiobook from Libro and I thought the cover looked cool. And then I also saw that the audiobook is actually narrated by Elle Fanning. So I was like, oh shit, like that's really cool. Like I always love seeing when actresses narrate audiobooks. I think that's so fun. And the story is kind of one of those kind of like contemporary, almost like slice of life kind of stories where we're just following this young girl named Margot who in fact does have a lot of money troubles. At the beginning of this book, it starts when she's like sleeping with her professor and like things are kind of messy between them, and then she quickly gets pregnant and then decides that she wants to keep the baby, and then it's kind of about her struggles dealing with like motherhood at a young age and she can't afford anything. And then it's about how she decides to start an OnlyFans as a way to make money, and that's when the book got really interesting to me. And none of that is spoilery, by the way. All of that is mentioned in the description of this book, but you know, when I jumped in knowing nothing, at first I was like, oh no, like I almost considered DNFing it because I'm like, I don't want to read about like a young single mother like struggling, like that's just not my vibe. But then like as soon as the OnlyFans thing came into the picture, I was like, oh, like what do you mean? Like that's so interesting. I really ended up liking the characters a lot. I mean, I didn't always agree with like Margot and all of her decisions, but I thought the characters felt very real to me. And I love the relationship that she had with her dad. She had kind of like a complicated, interesting relationship with him. But then I also really loved like the commentary in this book about, you know, women who have to do these kinds of things in order to provide for their families, like OnlyFans or like sex work in general. I feel like there was a lot of really interesting commentary about how men and women are viewed differently when they do things like these kinds of jobs. And I don't know, I was mildly surprised by this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I've been thinking about it a lot. I thought it was a good time. One of the biggest surprises for me this month is when I read Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose, because I thought I had sworn off Geneva Rose completely. Like I was like, I'm never gonna read another book from this author again. I don't like her writing. And then this one, I was genuinely pretty surprised. I ended up liking this one quite a bit. In this story, we're following these 3 siblings who their mother dies right at the beginning of this book. And so they're all going to be going back to their childhood home. They find this old family videotape where they find their parents back in the 90s doing some very sketchy, illegal shit. And then they're like, oh my god, like what do we do about this? And for me, I thought this book was so interesting because I actually really liked reading from all 3 siblings' perspectives. All 3 of the siblings are so different, but they were so toxic in the most like interesting way for me. I even thought the ending of this book, like I don't know, it got a little bit twisty and there were some things that I did not see coming, and I really liked the way that the story ended. So I am just as shocked as you are that I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and like I would actually recommend this to you. I thought it was a fun, entertaining read. It was quick to get through. The audiobook was only like 8 hours. It was fantastic. Right, the next book that I read was Convenience Store Woman, and this was another one that I ended up really enjoying. I read this one because of you, and this was another one that I ended up giving 4 stars. I really liked this. I ended up checking out the book from my library and I listened to the audiobook from my library, and this one is a Japanese book where we're following this character named Kiko, and she's working in a convenience store. She's single, she's like living her best life. Then people try to, you know, criticize her and they're like, oh, don't you want more out of life than just like working in this convenience store? Like, don't you want to move up in life? Don't you want to like get married and have a family? And I just found her character to be so interesting and so relatable. I thought this book had a lot of really funny, you know, like social commentary talking about like the expectations that society puts on us. Even if those are things that we don't even want for ourselves, we feel like we should want it because that's what society tells us to want. And it was just really interesting and really wholesome and really cute. I just really loved this story. I feel like this could have been a 5-star for me if the ending got a little bit more weird or like unhinged. But this was just a really like wholesome, sweet book. I don't know, I had a great time with it. I gave it 4 stars. And then I also ended up reading The Good Part, which is another book that I read because of you that I ended up giving 4 stars. I swear that video went so well. I found so many books that I enjoyed. But this is one that especially intrigued me because this is a romance that deals with like a time travel element, which is always something that I really love in romance books. And in this story, we're following this protagonist who she's like not having the best time, you know, like she has really messy roommates and she isn't having the best experience with her dating life. Goes to this like penny machine that like grants wishes and she asks if she can skip to the good part of her life. And then the next day when she wakes up, she's like in her 40s and she's like married to this man and they have 2 children together and she's like, what the fuck is going on? And so we kind of follow her as she's like trying to navigate this life that she doesn't know, but she knows it's her life in the future. And it was just so cute and like so wholesome. I feel like this story, it kind of has like that slow burn romance happening between her and her husband because like she doesn't know this man. So it's like she's slowly starting to like learn about him and fall in love with him in real time. And it was just so sweet. And then I also loved seeing her start to, you know, bond with her children over time in this book too. Like I thought their relationship was really cute. And then like the ending, like I don't know, I was really impressed by the ending because I feel like this character is faced with a really difficult choice. I don't know what I would have done if I was in her situation. So I just really enjoyed reading this. And I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It was a good time. For that same video, I also read The Haunting of Velwood, another book that I ended up giving 4 stars. And this one has got to be one of the most unique horror books that I've ever read. I've been thinking about this book a lot since I finished it. Like, oh my god, it was just so impactful and interesting. This one is also, it's just kind of hard for me to explain like what this one is even about because there were these 3 girls who grew up together. They were best friends. They all lived on this little street. And then one day the street became like haunted and now the street has this like dome like bubble around it where like they're the only 3 people who can access this street still because the street has this like little bubble. It's like under the dome or some shit or like WandaVision vibes, you know? And like they're the only 3 that can go in there. And our main protagonist that we're following, she thinks that her mom and her sister could still be trapped in this like bubble thing. And so then this story is about how she's going to be getting paid to go back in and try to figure out the truth of like, what is this place? How is this possible? And then there's also like a sapphic kind of relationship happening between 2 of the girls from, you know, this circle of friends. And I was so invested in the sapphic romance. Oh my gosh, I thought the tension between her and Brett was like, oh my god, it was so cute. I think this book was so fascinating because there were some kind of like plot twist or like things that I wasn't expecting to happen that really shocked me. Like I was like, oh shit, like this is so cool. Like I wasn't expecting the story to go in this direction. But then the only reason why I ended up giving this one 4 stars instead of 5 stars is because I found the ending, I just thought it got a little bit repetitive for me. You know, because like with a story like this, it's like she's going into this place that's like this bubble thing, like stuck in time kind of thing, right? But then I feel like a lot of the story, it started to get repetitive because it was just like she'd go in and then she'd come back out and then she'd go back in and then she'd come back out and she'd go back in. And you know, like it just started to get a little bit repetitive. I was like, oh my gosh, is anything else crazy gonna happen in the story? Like, I don't know. There was so much that I loved about this. I really loved the atmosphere. I loved the writing style. I loved the characters, like the romance that was happening between Talia and Brett. Like I was here for it. And I just thought the idea in general is fascinating. Like it's really, really a cool concept for a book. I had a great time reading this one. All right, and then I also read Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth, and I'm so excited to let you know that this was the most successful Sally Hepworth that I've ever had. This is definitely my highest rated book from this author so far. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars, and this is a mystery thriller that I'm so excited because I actually read this book this month because my friend Savannah had this book for her book club, the Lights Out book club, and I'm going to be co-hosting in the month of June. So if you missed the live show, I'll have the live show linked down below. But like, holy shit, I'm so glad that we read this one this month because I loved it so much. And I feel like this is going to be the perfect book for a book club discussion. So in this story, we're following these 3 girls, Jessica, Nora, and Alicia, and they're all foster sisters who grew up in the same foster care home. And now it's taking place like 20 or 30 years later or something, where they get a phone call from a detective who's like, hey, we found human remains at the foster care home where you grew up. And so this story is told in both present day, but then we also get flashback chapters of like getting to see their childhood getting raised in this foster care home. And like, dude, this woman named Miss Fairchild, she was their foster mother, and like she was the most awful, toxic human that I've ever read about in my life. And so reading from their perspective as children is definitely difficult in this book because there is a lot of like, you know, child abuse in terms of like emotional child abuse. There's a lot of gaslighting from her into like making them think that they did something wrong when they clearly did not. And like it was really difficult to read, but it was so freaking fascinating. I loved getting all the perspectives from all the sisters, and I just really loved this book because I loved the bond that these sisters had with each other and the way that they were like looking out for each other and always protecting each other like they were real sisters, like it was just and like these three sisters are like the main reason why this story was such a win for me. But then also like, oh my gosh, there were some things at the ending of this book that I personally did not see coming. Like there was at least one thing that I did see coming, but there was at least another like one or two things that I was completely thrown off by. And this is the kind of book that has one of those like final chapters that will make your jaw like hit the floor and be like, wait, what the fuck? And so I loved it. I personally loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was so good. Okay, and then the next book is gonna be one of my first 5-star reads of this month, and it's gonna be Strange Sally Diamond. This was actually another book that I read because of you. This was included in like the Patreon extended part of the vlog, and I love this book so much that I actually did like in that vlog, I talked about a bunch of spoilers with this book because I could not even control myself because I loved it so freaking much. And you know, as crazy as it is to say, I actually think the book Darling Girls and Strange Sally Diamond, they reminded me a lot of each other. But in Strange Sally Diamond, we're following this character named Sally who is just a little bit odd. Like she just doesn't really understand like typical society, social norms, and she's just one of those characters who's like a little bit quirky, you know, she's a little bit off. She kind of reminded me of like Eleanor Oliphant, or she reminded me of like Molly the maid, you know, like any of those characters. And at the beginning of this story, her father passes away and she starts to uncover the truth about what really happened to her when she was a child, because she doesn't remember anything about her life before she was like 7 years old when her dad adopted her. And so this book is actually, you know, exploring what happened to her before she was 7 years old. And in this story, we not only get Sally Diamond's perspective in the present day, but then we do get a second point of view that's like a flashback chapter. And like, holy shit, I don't want to spoil for you what the second point of view is, because I think even telling you what the second point of view is even about would be kind of a spoiler. But like, dude, that second point of view, oh my gosh, like I could not pull my eyes away from the page. I was like, what the fuck is going on? It was so fascinating. Like every single chapter, I was so invested. It kept pulling me back in. I just had to know what was happening. Like I think I read this entire book in like one afternoon because I was like, I need to know what's gonna happen next. And I just thought it was so shocking. It was so thrilling. Like this is everything that I'm looking for in a thriller, and I just loved it so much. Like seriously, if you haven't read Strange Sally Diamond, I would highly recommend reading it. I also just loved Sally's character so much. Like I loved the asexual representation in her. Like let's go. Like she's my asexual queen, okay? And like the way she would just be so like blunt and like straightforward with people. Oh my god, it would crack me up. Like she's so funny. So like I just really loved everything about this book. Like 0 flaws. 5 stars. It was so good. Another book that I ended up giving 5 stars this month is The Measure, which was another book that I read because of you. So like, holy shit, thank you so much for such a successful reading vlog. And this book, oh my gosh, this book is so right up my alley with what I tend to love in books. Like I wish that this is something that I feel like I could have written myself. Like that's how much I just like, it just tickles something in my brain. In this story, we are following 8 different characters who are living in this world where like one day everybody wakes up and they discover that there's these little boxes getting delivered to their doors. And when they open the box, there's a little string in the box that will determine the length of the rest of their life. And so this causes chaos in the world because everyone in the world, it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you're over the age of 22 years old, everybody's getting these boxes delivered. And people are trying to figure out like, do I even want to know? Do I want to like, you know, look at the box and see how long I have left to live? Even though we're following 8 different characters in this book, like you would think that it would be hard to get attached to any of the characters, but there was something about the way that this book was written. Like I just loved all the characters. I thought they were so well done. I thought every point of view added such a unique concept to the story. Like anything you can imagine, like say like there's a couple, right? And like one of them gets a long string, one of them gets a short string. Like anything that you can imagine that could happen with these strings is like explored in this book, which I thought was so fascinating and so cool. Even when it comes down to like, well, how does this affect like politics? You know, like how does this affect dating? How does this affect like a ton of different things that would affect our human experience? This book was just so fascinating, you know, it was so well written. And then the ending of this, even though I knew what was coming, like I knew what was gonna happen at the end of this book and I still cried. It just had such a emotional punch at the end of this that I loved it. Personally, like this is probably going to be in my top 10 of the year, I would assume. And then the last 5-star and the last book that I wanted to talk about for this month is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim, because holy shit. I actually was not expecting this book to be a 5-star when I picked it up, and that's honestly like the best feeling ever. But this is one that I was really intrigued by because this is a horror book, and the premise just says crying in H Mart meets my sister the serial killer, and it says this is a feminist psychological psychological horror about the making of a serial killer from a Korean American perspective. Like, does that not sound like the coolest thing ever? And like right up my alley. So this story kind of starts at the beginning where we're following this young girl named Ji-won, and she's kind of like having a tough time, you know, with her family because her dad, like their dad has recently left their mother, and now their mother is just really sad every night, and she's like trying to get them to eat the freaking eyeballs of the fish because she keeps saying the eyes are the best part, and like the eyeballs of the fish will bring you good luck if you eat it. And so that kind of like sparks this fascination in this main character with like eyeballs and like the idea of eating eyeballs. And then this story's kind of about how her mom starts to date this white man named George, who is like a walking red flag of a person, and how it's, you know, slowly starting to like drive her crazy. I feel like this is one of those books that's kind of like a slow burn character study, watching a woman go unhinged. Like, it's one of those books where like she's just slowly starting to like lose her mind, and you're just watching like this unraveling, you know? Like, it's definitely a slow burn. I could see a lot of people reading this and say like, oh, nothing really happens, and like, yeah, you'd be right, like nothing really happens, but I loved it. Like, it was just so my unique brand of like weird when it comes to horror. I love books like this that are a lot more like psychological and scary, and like they just slowly creep into your subconscious. I thought it was so well written. Like, dude, I will read anything that Monica Kim writes in the future. Oh my god. And this main protagonist was so interesting to follow because she's not even really like a good person herself. Like, some of the things that she's done, I'm like, girl, what? But she was so fascinating as a character to follow. Like, she's definitely a character that stands out to me in my head. Like, I've been thinking about her so much. The character is just so interesting. The ending of this book was so satisfying. Like, I wouldn't say that it's unpredictable. Like, it doesn't go in that kind of crazy direction, but like, it was just so satisfying still. And this is definitely a standout horror book for me. I actually annotated the entire book with like my highlighters and shit, and I wrote all up in this bitch. I actually talked about it a little bit more in the reading vlog that I did, and I kind of explained all the different annotations that I made, and it was so much fun. Oh my god, I haven't annotated a book like that in like forever. So this was just a really great reading experience. I can also see this one being in my top 10 of the year. Like, it might be my favorite horror book that I read this year. I love this. All right, so those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. Holy crap. I mean, the fact that out of the 16 books that I read in the month of June, I had 9 books that I rated 4 stars or higher. Those are some great stats, especially compared to previous months. Like, oh my god, and I had 3 new 5-star favorites. Are you freaking kidding me? You'll have to let me know, how many books did you read in the month of June? What was the best book that you read in the month of June? I would love to know all your thoughts. If you've read any of these books, please do let me know your thoughts on them. And yeah, hopefully July will be going just as well. I mean, Summerween is just around the corner. Oh my gosh, I am so excited for Summerween. I'm gonna be posting my next video after this. Should be my July TBR, or like kind of like a summer TBR, to be honest, as well as my Summerween TBR. There's gonna be a whole bunch of stuff to look forward to, so definitely check out my next video to see more info about Summerween, because it's gonna be coming up very soon. And thank you so much for watching, as always, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye!